You're listening to a Prairie Punk House Companion right here on the Prairie Punk Press Network. The views expressed by any host or any guest on the Prairie Punk House Companion are the personal views or opinions of the people who express them and do not reflect the views or opinions of anyone else on the show or any company, employer, or any other organization that the individual expressing them has or will affiliate with in the past, present, or future. Hi, everybody. You're listening to Prairie Punk House Companion. We are now on episode 54. My name is Neckbone.
Hi, I'm Jerbear, and according to our dead friend Nathan Gilson, 54 is the unluckiest number.
Is there a story behind that?
I seem to recall him getting in a car crash on Kellogg, which is Highway 54. And then he was driving 54 miles an hour and got in another wreck. And something else happened, and so he just would avoid that number.
I don't think it was that he got into a car accident on Kellogg 54. I think it was that he was driving up the on-ramp and his car just broke before he could even get up there. Yeah.
That could be also.
Right. Like trying to get on it from like it was near like Kellogg and like Webb or something like that.
I thought it was out west, but it doesn't really matter.
Who knows?
Yeah, I know that there was some sort of wreck also.
Yeah.
Anyway, we finally have our guest that we have been trying to organize coming on. Our friend Amanda, also known as @Miss Entropy. She's got quite the resume of experience and expertise. We met.
I would just call it bad luck.
Bad luck. So we met in the punk rock scene in Wichita back in the late 90s. You were mutual friends with Ashley, and so we started kicking it back then, and then reconnected on Facebook, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago.
20 years ago, maybe. What's time?
I don't know. And then, I was watching a lot of your posts about neo-Nazis, white nationalists, and ISIS. And then I heard you on one of my favorite podcasts, Citations Needed, and I was like, holy shit.
Was that on Citations Needed?
Yeah, you were.
Oh, okay.
I love that you've done so many podcasts that you don't remember that.
It may have been the Intercepted podcast with Jeremy Scahill, but I'm pretty sure it was on Citations Needed, because I listened to that way more than I listened to Intercepted.
Nice. I'll have to look it up.
I don't know. I'll look it up too.
I'll rant to anybody that has me on where, give me a platform to complain about things, and I'm absolutely happy to show up. So when I have to update the resume sometimes, because I'm a terrible procrastinator, I'll just Google myself and find horrifying things.
Oh no!
Incidentally, I did that the other day and found out a talk that I gave about ISIS on a Pornhub link, which is a choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
all right.
Something for everyone, I suppose.
I mean, I just go there for the articles.
Yeah.
Actually, in Kansas, Pornhub is banned without showing them, like giving them your ID, because of our draconian laws here.
Yeah. And your dad is totally safe under this administration too. So go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is there a story here? Did you say your dad?
Oh,
your data.
He says data weird.
Okay.
Yeah, I say data. I say data because I'm from Kansas. That's how we say it.
I will say, for one, it's great to finally be able to do this podcast with you guys, and I never get back to Kansas enough and I love that state. I don't think that Kansas gets the respect that it deserves for being pretty badass and radical, until fairly recently.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Um,
I think
but
I mean the Summer of Mercy kind of was the pivot in Kansas politics. All those motherfuckers from San Diego came here and kind of ruined our state.
mhm.
Uh
You know, did I ever send you the piece that I wrote about the abortion wars in Tiller?
I don't know. I don't remember, but I would definitely be interested in reading it.
Mhm.
I
It's one of my
remember
I would
Substack.
too.
I
It's
remember the
it's pretty
Summer
dark.
Mercy.
I do too. I was related to Tiller by marriage, actually.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I didn't
So
know
he
that.
was an uncle.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've written quite a bit about, the realization of Kansas as being essentially a childhood and adolescence in a domestic terrorism campaign, which is not
Hmm.
something that occurred to me until, dealing with ISIS in Iraq and Syria, and having to look back at that experience and unpack it in really upsetting ways. But yeah, that had a huge impact on me. And actually, the Nuremberg files, when that was posted, like Ashley and other teenage girls like our age volunteering for escort duties at Tiller's clinic was kind of
Hmm.
like a rite of passage, and sort of the first foray for a lot of us into activism. But
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nuremberg files like had no problem listing our names as children, literally.
Jesus Christ.
And it's very odd because I never thought of those experiences as uh, I don't want to say exceptional, but anything out of the norm until fairly recently, which I
Mhm.
think more people should think about.
Yeah, I mean obviously I have a different experience with that as, a white man. But
Mhm.
and not as much as the activism side, but just the crazy shenanigans I got into don't seem
Hmm.
exceptional to me, but when I tell stories around people outside of my peer group, I get the weirdest looks like,
Oh
what
yeah.
kind of fucking life did you live? And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seemed normal to me. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
People just
I
don't
mean,
believe me half the time. They think I'm making shit up.
Hmm.
that's very familiar.
Mhm.
Yeah. I have an inside joke with a couple friends about being like the Forrest Gump of really shitty geopolitical nonsense, you know? Um,
Um,
and sometimes you have really bad luck and you need to make the best of it, in my opinion.
yeah.
Um,
So how did you go from um a kid in Kansas hanging out with filthy drunk punk rockers to the world of academia and terrorism and white nationalism?
well, okay, for one, I'm just going to be incredibly obnoxious and cut you off on white nationalism and
Okay.
beg that you never say white nationalism again, and instead you only say white supremacy.
Okay.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and I have,
Fair enough.
very, very particular reasons for that I can get into later if you want. But long story short, so I have a restless soul, and it's not that I didn't love Kansas, but I wanted to see the world, and I was poor and from a pretty problematic, dysfunctional home. So I moved out, not really by choice, pretty young, and to pay for school, scholarships, etc. So I ended up getting a Fulbright to go abroad to Morocco, do research there, because initially I wanted to work on tattooing and body modification, the arts.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I set out to do. And who knew I had shit in common with Hitler, right? Like a failed artist trajectory. Um, but in any case, again, it's kind of the accidental bad luck trajectory that I don't really see as bad luck, but unfortunate events, according to some people. So I had done a lot of work in Morocco on tattooing, and that's what I was going to write my dissertation on. And I ended up being in the region for the the so-called Arab Spring, which is a really
Hmm.
annoying term. But the series of uprisings and revolutions in North Africa from, I was there from 2010, I think, through about 2013 and back and forth. And I'd lived there before, but a lot of my friends were artists and activists and, people on the left. And I've got this weird thing, and probably part of it is growing up in Wichita during the abortion wars, where like the smell of tear gas was sort of like Folgers for me in the morning. Like
Hmm.
I I can't stay away from situations where people are suffering if I can't watch and not try to do something. And so a lot of it was wanting to support friends of mine, going to, the protests, helping facilitate things that I won't talk about for obvious reasons, depending on what country it was. But none of this was in any way, shape or form in association with like governmental policies or objectives whatsoever. And in that experience, because of what's happened with media outlets, you start hanging out with freelance journalists and you get really close to each other because, you know, wars and revolutions and conflict zones make really fast, really solid connections. And so
Yeah,
I
it's
became
trauma
close.
bonding.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a degree of that, but I also think it's I don't know, I wouldn't really call it trauma bonding so much
Mm.
as, it's honestly like military service in a lot of ways, right? Depending
Hmm.
on, I mean, you have to, if you want to survive, you need to have somebody around you that has the same dark sense of humor to cope, right?
Hmm.
Um, there's a that reminds me of a phenomenal book called My War Gone By, I Miss It So, and it's about the Serbo-Croatia conflict, written by Anthony Lloyd, who's a British journalist, and he was a heroin addict as well, and it switches between his memoir about addiction and recovery and the experience of conflict, and he talks about adrenaline junkies as being a very real phenomenon and examines it in parallel. And I think that's super key. I mean, there's a lot of people who can only relate to one another in that circumstance. So, it
Hmm.
makes for a certain kind of bonding, but I think trauma bonding kind of apologizes it in a way that I don't want to accept because I don't see it as that negative. I see it as necessary and kind of emancipatory, if
Hmm.
that makes any
No,
sense.
that makes sense.
But so, yeah, I think it was either in Libya or Egypt, got close to Stephen Soloff and James Foley, who were two of the American journalists that later would be kidnapped and beheaded by ISIS. And, the last thing that I ever went to touch with a 10-foot pole was anything related to terrorism
Hmm.
for a variety of reasons, and the least of which is it's such a problematic category, right? Because
Hmm.
there's zero consensus whatsoever in the entire world about how should you define this, so much so that the United Nations has released declarations about the lack of consensus. And even within the United States, the FBI and CIA and DOD, there's not a unified definition whatsoever
Well, I think
shared
there is
between
now
any
with
organization.
with
There's not.
NSBM 7. I
There's
think we're
not.
all just terrorists now.
That's true.
Yeah, domestic
But
terrorists.
that's a
Yeah.
whole separate like issue that I will be happy to rant about for the rest of your life and maybe regret it. But anyway, so basically, long story short, trying to find and help get my friends out of ISIS's hands was kind of a thing. That was going on for a couple years, and I ended up finding out the news from a video that someone had posted on Facebook, and I don't remember who or what, but I do remember with crystal clarity seeing the screenshot of Jimmy and thinking that it was like some sick, twisted, like inside joke between some of like conflict journalist peers. And so I clicked it and I was like, what the hell is this, right? And I
Fuck.
watched it, and for the first half of it, like I was cracking up because I was like so unbelievable that I couldn't connect it with reality.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until at the end of the video, after they execute Jim, execute isn't even the right word, right? Murder.
Hmm.
But then they bring on Steven. And like in that moment, something happened and clicked in me where I went to the bathroom and just projectile vomited because it became real and
Hmm.
in like this really visceral way. But the whole getting to work on terrorism thing, in the moment of watching that clip,
Hmm.
I'm somebody that is has always been really dedicated to the idea of representation and media narratives and how powerful they are. And I have friends and family and loved ones that are brown and Muslim, and I've
Hmm.
seen those members of myself, right, die like literally in front of me in war zones. And it didn't upset me as much as that video did, which was
Hmm.
disturbing. But way more disturbing than that was my immediate inclination was burn Syria to the ground. I don't give a fuck about civilians. And the
Hmm.
fact that I thought that for even a fraction of a second was so horrifying to me on so many levels. Um, and I'm ashamed that I thought it, but it's also how we're trained to think, right?
It is.
But
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me, it was this
Decades of
like,
indoctrination
oh yeah,
don't just go
centuries
away.
really. But I could totally nerd out and talk about like, you know, 1798 in Egypt and Napoleon and how much of the militaristic like framing of the so-called Middle East originates there. But anyway,
Hmm.
so essentially, I kind of came to this fork in the road where I was like, I really need to sit and think about why I reacted that way and what to do about it. Because it's extremely upsetting that this is an area that I've dedicated like my life to, like I'm thinking about how these narratives shape the way that we behave in really tangible, violent ways. And I fell for it.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
what the fuck is like, I don't know, Christopher in Ohio supposed to do, you know?
Right.
And so then there's this dilemma of like, I don't want to talk about the deaths of my friends in a way that would give me like professional credibility because it's disgusting. But at the same time, if I don't engage this stuff in a public forum, you know, because it needs to happen and people need to be aware, then I stand for nothing.
Hmm.
Um, I'm a traitor to myself. I'm basically letting them die for nothing, and I'm actively being complicit in horrifying shit. So I started talking about it and giving lectures on it and responding to media, and then I had the State Department reach out to me and ask me to, do consulting for them on the propaganda aspects, and um, that's sort of how I got sucked into that field, which is really uncomfortable for me
Hmm.
for obvious reasons, right? But
Yeah. I
I think
mean,
one, go ahead, sorry.
oh no, I was just gonna say, as a leftist, getting involved with the State Department has so many pitfalls and
Hmm.
It does. It absolutely
cognitive
does.
dissonance and shit like that. But um, sometimes it's important to face that shit for the better good.
I totally agree. And I think that one thing that people on the left need to be a lot more nuanced about and thoughtful in approaching is the importance of strategic decision making
Hmm.
and transparently discussing those moral conflicts and ethical decisions. I mean, for me, uh, I was telling this story actually last night to someone. So when I got the call from the State Department asking me to do this, the person that reached out started the call with, um, condolences for the loss of your friends, Mr. Foley and Mr. Salah. And I lost it. And uh, they said, we're so sorry. And I said, you should be, because it's your fucking fault.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a reason that I say that, and I won't digress too much, but um, a lot of the decisions that were made by the Obama administration around that time to essentially secure a midterm result that was favorable to the Democrats, it rested on Obama's fear of backlash for the Bo Bergdahl Taliban prisoner exchange. So he didn't want to look weak on terrorism.
Right.
And there were a lot of really awful things about trying to get those hostages back that I definitely hold Obama accountable for. I hold, the Democratic Party accountable for, and it's disgusting. So, I'm not going to take a call from the State Department and not tell them how I feel, but they opened this discussion about like, listen, we would like you to go. They have like it's essentially, I mean, I don't think it exists anymore, probably, but a public diplomacy initiative where they send subject matter experts around the world to speak with different security services abroad and cultural organizations and educational institutions about whatever topic. And I laughed when he asked me if I would be willing to do this, and I said, this is such a dilemma for me because I will not pretend that I want anything to do with diplomacy because I will never toe a nationalist party line that I disagree with. It's not going to happen. And I don't want to be seen as an agent of shit that I do not agree with on a moral level, entirely aside from my personal experiences and biases like about friends getting murdered, right? And so I said, I will take this under consideration and likely accept, but I would like you to know that this is a dirty exchange because I know very well that your objective is to send me around as a sign of how much you tolerate critique and dissent from your own citizens. And I will be very clear that I will shred you everywhere I go. And I would like it if we were both very clear about the fact that I do not work for you. I do not represent you. This is an opportunity that I will only take because I feel like the platform to reach people is more important than some, bullshit ideological purity test that is ultimately self-defeating. If you actually care about changing things, and that doesn't mean, getting co-opted by the system or compromising your ethics, but it means being more creative, I think, and flexible and clear in thinking through this decision. So I decided to go, and I was really happy that I did. But it was funny because the State Department, they had minders with me everywhere, of course, and every place I spoke before I got up, they were very clear that this woman is not a State Department employee. Her views do not, And I was like, thank God. It's interesting though because like I've had a lot of experience working or doing work for, I will say, government organizations. I've never wanted to be a government employee and never would in the sense of, like actually working for DHS, or DOD. That would never happen with me because again, I cannot, in good conscience, represent decisions that I do not stand behind, right? But I have done a lot of consulting work for them. And I don't normally talk about that so much. I mean, I'm not quiet about it, but people so often are eager to read that as being like a Fed or a tool of the state or what have you. And I think that while that's understandable to a certain extent, that we need to be much more pragmatic and strategic and smart and actually concerned about tangible change versus, alienating a couple shitheads that, have more patches than you and want to be cooler, right? Like, and I don't regret that. But so, yeah, I've done a lot of consulting in like quote unquote counterterrorism, even though
Are you still consulting under this administration?
No, I'm not. Okay. Not at all. Yeah. Like, I still help, agencies when they reach out to me and ask me, like, hey, can you give us feedback on something? But there's a lot of like murky connections in this world, right? Where like de-radicalization NGOs that are full of former extremists have connections with the government because, if somebody, for example, I'm going to not disclose anything that's identifiable, but there have been members of neo-Nazi organizations abroad that knew about really devastating plots of political violence, and it was a red line. So they went to the authorities, and I mean, snitched is what some people would say.
Yeah.
And it was a breaking point that led them to leave the movement, but there are obvious consequences, especially if you're a U.S. citizen abroad involved in that. So you end up with feds up your ass for good reason. And oftentimes those feds will reach out to, former organizations to help give this person support and make sure that they're not, running around without. I mean, de-radicalization is such a bullshit premise because you can't de-radicalize anyone ever, right? All you can do is be there to support someone that's having that cognitive break and is open to it. So I hate those terms.
Yeah.
But anyway, all this is to say, man, I've gone on such a rant. I forgot where I started on the rabbit hole. But so with this current administration, no, not anymore. But what I do is when a former NGO reaches out to me about a specific threat person that they're aware of, or somebody that has been involved at DHS reaches out, etc. Like, yeah, in those cases, yes, with trepidation. In terms of actively I mean, they wouldn't be interested in hiring me as a consultant at all, obviously now. Which is really bizarre because under the first Trump administration, I don't know, you guys would probably be aware of this, but a lot of people aren't. The far right and white supremacist threat was ranked as the number one national security priority, far above ISIS, Al Qaeda, or any other group under the first Trump administration, right?
Right.
And also at that time there was this kill list that I was listed on, and I ended up having to deal with the FBI as they were investigating that. And this is, kind of another issue with people on the left. I totally get we protect us. And I believe in that, firmly. But also in some cases, right, where you're living in a village in the middle of nowhere in a very white supremacist area, and you've seen, police with SS bolt tattoos.
Yeah.
And there's not an active leftist solidarity community to protect you. What are your choices? Do you want to not take security measures when the FBI calls you and says, "Hey, just so you know, someone's trying to kill you"? I mean, I'm not gonna be like, well, then I'll get kicked out of my friend group. No, I'd like to survive. Like, I mean, it's not the end all be all for me, but I mean, that's just.
Well, I mean, we live in the society we live in, and we are victims to that system and have to lean on that system, whether we want to or not. And it's a nice thought to not have to rely on
it's a luxury,
the system to help us. But sometimes, luckily I haven't been in a position where I've needed that help, but I mean, no one can say how they're going to act or react to a situation until they're in it. So people on their fucking high horse and on their podium talking about how pure they are and how they'll never do this or never do that. I don't fucking believe them because they haven't been in that situation. You don't know what the fuck you'll do.
Right.
Often that's exactly the case, right? But also I think that the big issue is, having the courage of your convictions, right? I mean, if you're in that situation, I'm not going to pretend I didn't talk to the FBI back then. Of course I did.
Yeah.
Does it mean that I was relying on the state first and foremost for my defense and security? Absolutely not, because I'm not an idiot,
Right.
But I think this is an interesting question because, like a lot of times dealing with doing a threat assessment of someone, say for an alphabet agency, is it going to get that person apprehended? Most of the time, no, it's not. Does that mean it's a waste of time? No, it doesn't, because in my opinion, all we can do is just everything in our capacity to attempt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just because the efforts more often than not uh, don't succeed the way that you would like them to succeed is absolutely no reason to throw up your hands if you are actually committed to the ethics that you pretend to practice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
that's anathema to me. Like 99% of the stuff that I do doesn't succeed. Like I am an expert in one thing and one thing only, and that's failing to
Mm-hmm.
accomplish what I'd like to accomplish,
Hmm.
which is,
Yeah.
preventing people from being harmed when they're innocent. But, you know, I don't really think that you have much of a choice but to try every way that you can. And it's
Right.
not
I
going to
mean,
look the same for everybody.
it's it's not ideal, but I think it's incumbent upon someone to use all of the tools available to them to protect themselves in
Yeah.
a really
Mm-hmm.
I
shitty
agree.
situation where you're on a fucking kill list. You know what I mean?
But I mean,
Like,
but hold on, I want to like put a pin in that because for me, it's not. I don't want myself to be the center of this discussion, right? Because
no, 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 no.
I mean, it's an example because
Yeah.
generally for me, I've reported one threat in my entire life, and I get them all the time. Um, and I reported it because I was a professor at the time, and it came to a university address, and I was concerned about my students, you know?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of my take on this is like, it's not that I'm fatalistic or that I'm a kamikaze, although I've been accused of behaving that way, but like, I'm not really that attached to my life.
Hmm.
Um, which doesn't mean I don't think it matters, but for me, the issue of acting is always related to broader harm to other people. Like that's ultimately to me what matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So, that's why I'm willing to even attempt trying to deal with like federal organizations. And it's frustrating and it's I'm not even gonna say not ideal, like it's loathsome, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I think one thing that a lot of activists don't really understand, and this isn't meant to sound as pejorative as it probably does, but the way that networks and connections work in this world outside of like just quote unquote purely activist spaces, right? I mean, like say for example, someone is harassing and threatening me on a social media platform, and a friend of mine at a former extremist group in another country sees it and calls me and is like, "Hey, this, I saw this, what's going on?" Because this person is an issue. We get to talking and they're saying, well, I still have good connections at the FBI, believe it or not, or at DHS. Um, why don't we pursue this? Because, this person has like a problematic set of behaviors towards other people. Then to me, I'm like, well, absolutely, I'm going to do everything that I can because again, it's not about me, but it the thing that like framing this as like an exercise in futility is frustrating because a lot of times the way that attacks have been prevented are those personal connections where people have an in and like it's happened to me before where I have a lead on something and can't get like I've dealt with Canada before on like a Christian identity neo-Nazi that had murdered his wife and figured out some links that were involved with the League of the South, and the murder was in Western Canada. So I was frustrated because I was trying to get someone to listen to the fact that this wasn't just an intimate partner violent situation. It was incredibly ideologically motivated and it was transnational. And it was linked to the people that organized Unite the Right and
Hmm.
wasn't getting through, obviously. So I had to call a friend of mine that I had met at United Nations counterterrorism summits because this person was Canadian and had, a lot of inroads with CSIS and RCMP. And that got me through to where they would actually pay attention, and that's something that I think a lot of activists that have never worked in the shadows of this kind of world don't understand. And it's like, it's no one's fault, right? But I think it's worth talking about and thinking through because we're not really at a point in history. You guys definitely know, so many people do, where we can afford to throw up our hands at any aspect of this,
Yeah.
and say it's not going to work, because
Yeah.
then why aren't you just, capitulating and out there in your brown shirt too,
Right.
Right.
if
Yeah.
that's really how you feel?
Well, you mentioned earlier, seeing like, well, can you trust the cops? You see the cop with their SS tattoo clearly visible. And it reminded me of when I lived in Norfolk, Virginia. There was this cop who was like directing traffic on this side street because there's, construction we had to go around. And I noticed
Hmm.
that he had a giant black sun tattoo on
Okay.
his arm.
Okay.
This was so long ago. And
Wow.
Norfolk is, it's 200,000 people. It's a
Hmm.
at least 50% black city. And you just think like, I mean, from your understanding of things, and I feel like I know the answer to this already, but I mean, has the amount of like white supremacists and groups like that, are they more infiltrating those organizations now than they did in the past, or have they just always been in those
Well,
organizations, like especially like FBI and stuff like that? Like
this is
local
a really
cops is a different
interesting
thing.
question, and I will say
Hmm.
that from my experience, I mean, I don't like the Patel FBI days are completely a new frontier for me. Most of the
Hmm.
people that I know in this world don't know people there anymore. I mean, 'cause so many of the people that were involved in monitoring the far right and working on, neo-Nazi assassinations, etc., were fired. Um,
Right.
but I will say that historically speaking, one of the trickiest things about talking about infiltration, I mean, there's several tricky things. One thing, first and foremost, that I would say that gets very frustrating, and again, like, it's absolutely critical that we do talk about the history of policing in
Hmm.
slave patrols in this country, and the fact that white supremacy has been a constant. However, it's not helpful to dismiss the idea of like infiltration campaigns as just more of the same, because the fact of the matter is, if you really want to dismantle and uproot this kind of shit, you need to recognize the changing forms that it has taken over time. And one thing that really needs to be confronted is the fact that after the civil rights movement, for the first time in the United States, there was a professional and personal cost to being publicly racist. So
Hmm.
what happens, right? Like, of course, you don't have Klan police chiefs that after the passage of the Civil Rights Act just like suddenly loved black people. I mean, come on, that did not happen. What happened was, a change in tactics and strategy and taking things underground and not wanting to lose those professional and personal cachet that they had. So what that means in practice is you need to know how it operates if you want to prevent the harm. And as an example of this, there's a group called Shadow Moses a couple years ago. There was one person in San Diego, and there was another in Georgia. One was a police officer. Um, and it was a white supremacist organization involved in, manufacturing ghost guns, if I'm not mistaken, but also other illegal firearms modifications and trying to spark the race war, et cetera. Nothing that will surprise you. However, the police officer in Georgia spoke in his text messages about deliberately arresting Black men for felonies they did not commit to disenfranchise them politically by
Hmm.
Hmm.
stripping the right to vote through this. And why I'm saying this matters is, you need to confront those things in the justice system, and it's not helpful to say like every instance of police brutality is an explicit white supremacist, right? I mean, there's normalized racism, yes, but there's also concerted efforts like that Shadow Moses operation that I just
Hmm.
mentioned. But so back to the other part of this, like, you know, yes, these organizations came out of slave patrols, and it's critical to know that history. But the
Yeah.
mechanisms and strategies they have used have shifted, and we need to be aware of how that works. Again, if you were actually committed to fighting it. But so, in terms of the question of like, have they always been infiltrating, et cetera? I mean, one of the trickiest things about tracking this is that law enforcement organizations, just alone in the United States, are so different and diverse and not under an umbrella that makes for easy monitoring or consistent, transparent sort of accountability, hate crime statistics, what have you. It's going to vary across like, LASD through LAPD, for example, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's very tricky to track. I have found, though, that generally speaking, the local organizations are much more prone to infiltration than FBI has been historically.
Yeah.
Like in 2000, I think it was 2006, FBI had circulated a memo that was finally made public in 2020, I want to say, but it was about ghost skins, and ghost skins are, I haven't really actually encountered this phrase much in the movement, but it was the FBI term for white supremacist covert bad actors within policing and military organizations
Hmm.
and the threat they posed. Um, and so, the FBI in the past, and this does not, I know people will hear this and think, oh my God, you love the feds, which is absurd, but they historically have been more attentive than other agencies have been. Which
Mhm.
doesn't mean they have done a great job
Well,
Right.
because
I
the
mean,
bar is in hell,
Mhm.
but
so I mean, I
that's
think
part
that
of it.
might have something to do with their experience with white supremacist organizations, and they, I would assume, they know the actual threat that they can present.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
mean,
mean, that's the interesting thing, right? Because this is my argument to anybody in law enforcement or the government that gets really offended when you say infiltration is happening. The biggest threats, if you really believe that there are not neo-Nazis among you, right? There's no problem with investigating allegations that there are. You would
mhm,
want to prove that they're not, A, but more importantly, they're the biggest threat to the legitimacy of policing by your own logic. So if
mhm,
you're going to say this is just a few bad apples, you have incentivized rooting out those bad apples,
mhm.
and I mean, they make you all look bad for one. Also, they've got a really good track record of killing their fellow brothers in blue.
Right.
Um, you know, so these are
Mhm.
things that I think people need to talk about. But circling back, Nick, to what you were asking about, like, has this been a constant thing or is it recent?
Mhm.
A lot of white supremacist organizations throughout history since the civil rights period, right? So, like in the 60s on in the modern American white supremacist movement, I mean, have emphasized like the idea of infiltration, most notably Pierce and Metzger. But
Mhm,
I will say that Metzger was incredibly strategic about kicking off an organized strategic program that began this is what my book is about that I'm currently writing in no small part. He was incredibly strategic and programmatic about this project, and it started in the early 70s. Notably, what differentiates him though is he focused on the INS and Border
Mhm.
Patrol
Yeah.
at that
mhm,
time. And one thing that I really wish people would understand more, we talk about the Overton window shifting recently. The groundwork for that was not Donald Trump or the GOP of the past 15 years. I mean, Metzger actually staged this huge, like, I don't publicity op, I guess you would say, with Duke in 70, what was it, 75, 76? I can't remember exactly right now, but they flew on a helicopter, landed on the roof of an INS building in San Ysidro, and were offering to run a Klan volunteer border patrol. And INS was, depending on which person at INS was speaking, was receptive or not. But what we do know is that, I mean, I have depositions um, in which Metzger admits that he had been involved. This was around 77, the deposition I'm thinking of, where he admitted that he had untold numbers of Klan members seated already within INS, and he didn't know how many. So I can tell you
mhm,
that, and one thing about Tom Metzger, viciously awful human being in terms of his ideology, he was brilliant in a lot
mhm,
of ways that actually mirror Zarqawi in Iraq, the guy that
mhm.
basically took the insurgency and turned it into a civil war. I mean, their
Mhm.
methodologies are very similar, particularly um, being media strategists in ways that aren't commonly recognized as a fundamental, component of warfare. But so Metzger had been doing this to push like Pat Buchanan and the paleoconservative movement further to the right on immigration. And so much of the rhetoric that we see today actually started with literally that former Klan member and skinhead granddaddy, Tom Metzger, in the late 60s and 70s. I mean, have you seen those illegal immigrant hunting permit stickers? They're awful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That actually was something that Metzger was selling on his website for, ever.
Forever. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize like any of this shit. And like, so.
And
it's not popular to talk about it, believe me.
Right. And when you drop the standards, like let's face it, and I think maybe another reason they may not have infiltrated the FBI as much is, and I am not defending the FBI by any stretch of the imagination, so please do not take this.
Oh, no, I understand.
But to join the FBI, you have to be educated. There's, years of training. You have to have a degree. To join the Department of Defense or Department of War, as they're calling it now.
Well, technically, it's not legally the Department of War.
It is not. It is not legally.
Anyway,
it's but to go into most of the military branches, which they have, they harp so much on how they have to keep the standards up, and that's why women shouldn't be allowed in certain roles. But then they drop the standards to get more recruits, so it's a total contradiction.
This is something that I really, really want to point out because it's so important. During the war on terror, like the first few years, especially after 2003 March and the invasion of Iraq and that clusterfuck shit show, the military did, what they have done with ICE and Border Patrol now, dropped the standards so much that they were accepting recruits with visible neo-Nazi affiliation tattoos and making no bones about it, right? I mean, the Coast Guard no longer considers the swastika to be, a discrediting emblem. And what's crazy is, if you have not heard of him, Christopher Hassan was basically a covert neo-Nazi operative within DOD for 25 years. And he was a Coast Guard member when he was finally caught. But so that to me is just crazy, But I think there's a really important point to be made about the connections between the war on terror and domestic policy that have been going on way before, the past year. And I wish people had a fraction of historical memory because it's really, really significant.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to say, I think you're right about the FBI having, higher standards. And I also think that, we have to point out, because a lot of white supremacist groups will bring this up, COINTELPRO, and how J. Edgar Hoover targeted them. Yeah, that's kind of true. However, Hoover had like a fraction of the attention in the counterintelligence illegal spying operation on the KKK, and it was largely because of the need to compensate for doing, like sending Martin Luther King a letter telling him to kill himself, and all of the monitoring of Black Power groups, the American Indian movement, the New Left, feminism, etc. But I think, again, like so much of this, it's so much more complicated than like FBI good, FBI bad, like
right.
On these issues. But I also think it's much easier to get away with this shit at a local law enforcement level because cops that get caught doing things like rampant police brutality, or in one case, the police chief in Oklahoma who is outed for running a white supremacist website, you just transfer them.
Kind of like Catholic priests, but
well, that's what they're doing within DHS. They're just transferring people to somewhere else, and that's another organization, even more so than the DoD right now, that has just kicked their doors open for anybody who can walk in and fog a mirror.
And the biggest problem with DHS, right, is like the whole thing was created in a post 9/11 terrorism mindset,
right?
And people don't think about.
I think people forget that. People, especially people younger than us, who maybe don't remember the pre 9/11 world, as well as we do, and people older than us who somehow have forgotten the DHS didn't exist before 2001.
Hmm.
Um, you know, they just for some reason think that this is, Department of Homeland Security has always been and always should be, and you're like, we function just fine without them for most of our
Yeah.
country's
I
history.
mean,
Right.
the irony to me too is that generally the people that justify DHS's creation after
Mm,
9/11, they'll inevitably use, oh, well, one of the reasons that 9/11 was not prevented was because of interagency conflict and information sharing not happening. But really, the story of that is about Ali Soufan, the Arab FBI agent that knew about the Cole bombings and actively tried to stop this with having turf warfare with CIA and
Hmm.
CIA, doing shit like extrajudicial assassinations and so on and so forth. It was turf warfare between those intelligence agencies, and
Right.
not necessarily an issue of lack of, information accessibility, so much as, I mean, CIA, come on, like the whole justification for the Iraq War was bullshit in the first place.
yeah.
For sure.
But so it's weird for me to do a hierarchy of federal agencies, like which one I like the most.
Hmm.
But the FBI has been less problematic in certain ways on a lot of things than other organizations. Still
Hmm.
Um,
objectively awful, but yeah,
yeah.
for what they're worth.
I want to kind of circle back to the Black Sun, uh,
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
just for people
Yeah.
unaware. That is not an ancient rune
It
that
is
was
not.
created by the Nazis to look like an ancient rune. It is
Mhm.
100% explicitly a Nazi tattoo.
It
That
did
Cool.
not
being said,
exist before the 20th century.
right.
You will not find it on any ancient texts or carved into any
Also,
So,
stones.
one thing
um,
man, spread, I know you guys know this, but spread it with everybody that you know, because a lot of the hardcore, neo-fash and transnational neo-Nazi groups now
Hmm.
have been seeding the Black Sun into like mainstream
mhm,
Republican circles. Like, I have this massive Twitter thread I can send you at some point that I wrote because Kyle Rittenhouse was depicted in a stickering campaign with a Sonnenrod halo, and
Jesus
people
fucking
that
Christ.
people that supported Rittenhouse and did not believe that he was a white supremacist. I mean, arguing the facts or merits of that accusation are entirely besides the point here.
Mhm.
Had no idea that they were being, like fash pilled, right? Which is the
Right.
whole idea.
Well, like
Um,
Rick Santorum's fucking
ugh,
Twitter ad or whatever,
Right.
with
Or
the black sun on it.
Glenn
But
Danzig had it on some fucking merch just last
yeah,
year,
yeah,
for
fuck,
God's
really?
fuck Glenn
sakes.
Danzig.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
fucking dumbass.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
Will you
so
send me that? I didn't
Yeah.
see that.
Hmm.
um, I think I don't know. So stick with me for a minute. Did you have to deal with the River City Skins when you lived here, the neo-Nazi crew?
No, not directly. No. I
Okay,
mean,
so we.
most of the stuff that I encountered, I will say, and this is important because we were talking about the abortion wars. People
Mhm,
don't know enough how much of the anti-abortion movement and the political violence within that, especially in Wichita, was directly associated with explicitly white supremacist actors like Christian identity movement.
mhm. Yep.
Had infiltrated like the army of God, right? Um,
Yeah.
is something really important to keep in mind. I have other thoughts on that, so remind me, but go ahead.
Um,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. So I feel like we were hyper vigilant about iconography, looking at
Hmm.
people's tattoos,
Yeah.
looking at their braces and their laces. And I know lace
Hmm.
code doesn't mean much anymore, but
Oh,
I
but it does to
still.
those in the know.
Right. Like, so I mean, I still look at laces, and there's not a ton of traditional skins in Wichita anymore.
I
Not
mean,
that there
there's
really
not
were.
really
Um,
in the US to the same,
but
I mean, extent that there were. Yeah.
right. But I still like I'll still look at laces if I see somebody in some with some boots on, just out of habit. And that
Hmm.
hypervigilance, like, because of that, I'm very familiar with iconography, and I'm curious if a lot of this iconography is well known to other people. And let's talk about Graham Plattner real quick with his fucking
I was just going to ask
Totenkopf
about that.
tattoo.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that you were going to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. I mean, I can't. I mean, I can't remember a time when I didn't know that the Totenkopf was a fucking SS symbol.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
it
okay.
it baffles me that somebody would get that tattoo and not know that it's some Nazi bullshit. And
I
I
think
don't know
there
if
are a
it's
couple
because of my
points here.
hypervigilance in the past or if it's
Right. Well, it
it's
became
bullshit.
it became
Well,
a
hang on
huge
a sec.
meme from 2006 on because of the
The
Mitchell and
Marines in
Webb,
Afghanistan, or no?
the
Okay.
the whole Mitchell and Webb sketch where they're the Nazis standing in the trench,
Oh yeah, yeah. Are we the
and
baddies?
yeah, Mitchell looks at Webb and is just like, "Did you notice we have skulls on our caps? I don't think
Mm-hmm.
the good guys usually have skulls on their cap." And like it's been a meme ever since then, so it's
Yeah.
just weird to have not encountered
Well,
that.
there's a couple different layers I think here that are super important. Jeremy, I do think, yeah, you're hyper vigilant in a way that, the average American, because of no small part our education system, is not, you know. But I think that's a separate subject from someone with Plattner's history, because the fact of the matter is, that particular emblem has been a subject of scrutiny for DoD in screening recruits long before Plattner's service. So it's not something, you could argue that, oh, I got this in like a youthful, whatever, fit of ignorance, but text messages have come out where he's talked about this and Reddit posts, and acknowledged this, knowing basically what it was. But to me, it really defies credibility that a serviceman would not have any familiarity with that particular image, more so because, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a big scandal with, I think it was a Marine unit in Afghanistan that had posed with an SS banner.
Hmm.
Um,
I
and,
remember that. Yeah.
it's
Was there a
very
Black
odd to
Sun
me.
too?
No, not in this
Okay.
particular
Not in
instance,
that one. Okay.
the one that I'm talking about. But so
Okay.
there have been these punctuations throughout, the past 30 years, especially in media coverage of military members with these kinds of iconography, and internal investigations at DoD and what have you. So I think it does stretch credibility to just chalk it up to like getting drunk in Croatia and getting a tattoo with your buddies. But that's not even my concern here. My fundamental concern is, you know, you didn't address it or cover it up until it became a media issue. And
Hmm.
one thing to me, I'm not saying that Plattner is a white supremacist. I don't have enough information to make that accusation. What I will say is that another aspect of, are we hyper vigilant and just more aware because we've been enmeshed in this stuff our whole lives? Or is the American population at large just really, really ignorant? It's an open question. But like,
Hmm.
um, what bothers me about this is people assume that because Plattner has good views on things, and good views, I mean, in terms of, mirroring one's own in certain areas,
Hmm.
that, he's on the left. He can't be involved in this. Well, you need to learn about third positionism,
Hmm.
I mean, just we were just talking about infiltration, not to cut you off,
yeah.
but I mean,
No, no, no,
you know,
not at all. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. And I mean, Metzger in particular is somebody that this is why I'm writing the book. Like, it's really important to focus on people like him. And part of the reason that he was so brilliant, Metzger wasn't a right winger at all. He wasn't a left winger at all. He
Hmm.
said all the time, use what works, and race is my religion, right? And for a lot of these groups, like, I understand the very real factual reality in terms of the GOP and the right wing has historically been far more open to fascist adjacent ideology than the so-called left. Facts, right? That does not mean that the left is impervious,
Hmm.
and the complete lack of awareness among a lot of what passes for the left of third position movements, and the fact that yes, there are left, like, quote unquote left in terms of economics,
Yeah.
fascist movements, they exist, And for campaigns of infiltration, this is particularly somewhere that you would want to target. Again, I'm not making that accusation about Platter, but what I am saying is these are things that need to be addressed, as well as the kind of response to him that's, oh, I don't care about like youthful indiscretions because he supports shit we need to support. Yeah, sure, I get that. But what you need to ask yourself is, who are you willing to ally with, right? Like, just if you're pro-Palestinian rights, etc., anti-Zionist in your political thought, great, do you whatever. But like, are you really going to accept a neo-Nazi bedfellow because you're co-signing that just because they're saying that they want to represent Palestine? And then that, again, this is not Flatner specifically, but it's a broader phenomenon. And like, my issues with him fundamentally are, A, people don't know that history, and it is something to be aware of. But B, to me, it's an issue of his credibility because he didn't take care of it when he first learned what it was by his own narrative. B, one of the biggest things to watch for when someone is an admitted former fascist, what do they do with their tattoos?
Right.
When do they take measures to engage in accountability and restorative justice, and how do they show you in action? So the fact that he didn't address it came out, and then he was forced to deal with it.
And then he got it covered up after the fact.
If you're committed to racial egalitarianism, etc., and you knew the significance of this mistake, why did you not take care of it? Why was it
immediately?
If I found out that I had a tattoo that was a
explicitly
Nazi
genocidal
or white supremacist tattoo that I didn't know about, and somebody was like, "Oh shit, that's actually a white supremacist tattoo," I'd be calling my tattoo artist that day.
Yeah.
When can you get me in? When the fuck can you get me in?
Well, and there's so many people. There's so many tattoo shops that are willing to cover up racist tattoos and gang tattoos for free.
Oh, absolutely. Exactly.
So it's not even an issue of not being able to afford to cover it up, because there are ways to do it. There's lots of places that will do that. And so it's a
not
huge
super
red flag
big.
for
He
me.
just could have gotten a black block over it if he wanted to.
I mean, to me, even the bigger issue than the specific tattoo, to me, is what it reveals about somebody's ethics and willingness to hold themselves accountable and be transparent. When you double down and try to dismiss something rather than saying, like, this is a problematic as fuck issue, and here's how I'm going to address it. Like, to me, that speaks to a problem that people need to be concerned with. And, I'm not a Maine voter, so I can't say don't vote for Plattner or vote for Plattner, because I honestly, a lot of his platform I totally into, but I question the ethics of a candidate that would react like that. And
I question the sincerity.
I mean, that, to me, that's secondary, because I just don't have enough information to be like, oh, he's a covert Nazi, because I'm not saying that. His behavior to me is like more problematic in a banal, everyday, like Hannah Arendt, kind of way. So that's my fundamental problem with him. I think people do hero worship of politicians way too much.
It's weird. It's super weird.
And I know people who are, experts in the field too. I know a guy who's been a practicing Norse pagan for decades. And he's like, I'm not going to fuck with Plattner. He's like, no. He's like, no, that guy's probably, he's like, he may not be a Nazi, but I'm not fucking with that guy. He had a Nazi tattoo for way too fucking long. And
the thing that scares me too is a lot of the people that are like self-identified far left that will double down on Plattner. And there's this eagerness to dismiss that aspect of, the tattoo and questions around it as, like fear mongering and hyperbole, that is just baffling to me. Because if you're going to excuse, visible affiliation symbols with the genocidal movement, I don't consider you an ally.
You're right.
The only thing I can think of for people that say that have that excuse for him are those people have never dealt with Nazis in their lives.
Right.
It's an abstract to them. And
I think that that's
it's
a lot
not
of the problem with the left,
it's not an
actually.
abstract to me
Yeah.
because,
Uh-huh.
I've been to Target before. I mean, the River City Skins here in town wanted to fucking kill me for a while. So, I mean, it's a very tangible threat to me, and I take it very seriously. So when I see somebody with a fucking
Mhm.
Totenkopf, I do not trust them.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's that whole idea of like you said, this whole politician worship. So we just keep moving the goalposts to keep
Hmm.
liking them, and you
Hmm.
see it
Yeah,
now with the people who are still so embedded in the MAGA movement that they're forgiving child rape
right.
because they
Absolutely.
just have to keep
Defending, I
moving.
mean, they're
So
It's
we're
forgiving
insane.
Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's
yeah,
a fucking bigot
yeah,
just because she opposes pedophilia. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
congratulations on not being
That's
a completely shitty person. I
that's
mean,
baseline. That's
that's below
baseline.
the bar. That is
Exactly.
Right,
below the
right.
bar of where you should be.
Yeah,
It's like the Chris
Like,
Rock stats where he's like,
fuck
you don't
no.
get a cookie for taking care of your kids. You're supposed
Right.
to take care of your kids.
right.
Like, why is
Yeah.
this
You're doing
something
your
to be
fucking
praised?
job as a human.
Hmm.
But I'm going to be really annoying here for a second and do
Hmm.
I mean, it's not contrarian. It's just me being like the dickhead that I am, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's not just a problem of like the MAGA contingent, right? Like, yeah, Hillary Clinton was a real problematic candidate. Did
Hmm.
I hate myself and vote for her anyway? I did.
Same.
In no small part because of the Supreme Court,
Hmm.
Yeah.
which is a huge factor and always has been to me in terms of like, the calculus of voting decisions. But, you see a contingent of people who want to worship Obama for everything. And you know what? I'm not saying that um, I'm not saying he's on the same level as Trump by any stretch of the imagination, but the fact of the matter is, what we are dealing with in Trump is something that was enabled by bipartisan previous administrations,
Oh,
and in no
fuck
small
yeah.
part, Obama's absolute failure to pursue actual justice and accountability for the
Hmm.
war on terror in the name of moving forward and the name of, wanting to be civil and wanting to compromise and
Right.
Reach
unify
across the
and
aisle.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
He
you
should have,
know,
I mean, d- he should have fucking charged the previous administration with war crimes.
Everyone
And then
in
he
that
should have
well,
not committed fucking war crimes.
exactly. I
yeah,
mean, part of the
that's true.
thing that makes me irate about the discourse on Renee Good and Alex Preddy, et cetera, is the fact that, like, I hated Anwar al-Awlaki, right? The Al-Qaeda
Hmm.
ideologue. But
Mm.
um, Obama did absolutely undertake an extrajudicial assassination of an
Yeah.
American citizen that did not directly commit violence, but was speaking about it. And I mean, that's a whole
Mhm.
Right.
problematic like story. But more than that, the issue to me is you also droned his underage son and his
Right.
4-year old daughter. And
Right.
these were American citizens. And, people don't want to engage that material
Hmm.
because, obviously Al Qaeda loved al Awlaki. And after a
Hmm.
certain point of time, he became very aligned with them. Wasn't initially, but
Hmm.
Mhm.
it's almost like the the taint of like brown Muslim terrorism will delegitimize your political discourse. I mean, and the fact of the matter is, you're going to be next against the wall if you don't rapidly pursue constitutional protections for people that you despise.
Right.
You are actively contributing to your own eradication, and that is
Yep.
never
Mhm.
more so than when it is an issue of justifying this against like your latest political opponent. Like after January
Right.
6th, I kept saying, absolutely not. We do not need a domestic terrorism campaign against people for January 6th.
Mhm.
Because first and foremost, like I can rant about the problems with terrorism as a designation in the first place, but let alone what's happened with domestic terrorism coming into being as an actual legal category, which is horrifying.
Hmm.
And pause on that for a second. Um, and that was my primary concern. Not because I
Well,
supported January Sixers, but because I'm not an idiot.
right.
Mhm.
Well,
I
they
mean, I am kind of.
always they always come after the left
Yeah.
with those
Exactly. I mean,
things.
it's always going
And
to blow back
so,
first and foremost on the most marginalized communities
like,
and the
I got
most
a
politically
Yeah.
disenfranchised. Yeah,
Hmm.
sorry.
Oh, no, no, no. I got a lot of shit for during COVID for not being fully on board of supporting the Canadian response to the truckers because there were some
Yeah.
neo-Nazis in those
Hmm.
truckers, but they're
Hmm.
they're debanking protesters.
Hmm.
And if we accept them debanking protesters on the right, who's
Hmm.
next? It's going to be
Yeah.
Hmm.
us. It's going to be the left
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
because they're more aligned with the right than they are with the left.
Yeah.
at this particular moment in time. Yeah, and that shit shifts, right? Like all the people that assume they will not be targeted by Trump because of their identities now don't realize that, like look at, when people talk about like the final solution in Germany, why was it called the final solution? Because there was shit that came before that,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So targeting communists, targeting,
Hmm.
student activists, targeting the Roma, targeting
Yeah.
queers,
Hmm.
targeting the Jews, like the lynch or not the lynchpin, I'm sorry, the barometer, like the goalposts keep shifting. So like Hitler having Ernst Röhm, the queer ally, who was not a
Hmm.
problem until he was a problem.
Until he was,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just next against the wall.
Right.
Mhm.
And it's one of the really unfortunate paradoxes of being committed to a pluralistic society that you have to be ethically committed in practice to protections for everyone,
Right.
Mhm.
And it sucks sometimes
Jer
as
Bear,
you
is there
remove
anything you
her.
want to plug before we go?
Um, nah, I mean, it's been it's been a week. It's late. I'm tired.
Hmm.
I'm stoked that we finally got to have Miss Entropy on. It
Yeah.
was a good time. I have shows coming up, but none in the near future. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think we're recording on Sunday.
Oh,
We
yeah.
will have
Awesome.
shirts soon. I think we're
Hmm.
gonna char shirt and patches. Shirts are gonna be $15. Patches are gonna be four for $3 or one
Hmm.
for $1.
Cool.
Yep.
Oh, and eventually we're going to make merch for the show.
Yeah, I need to go
Eventually.
talk to Shayla
Okay.
and
Cool. Let's make t-shirts.
yep, for
Yeah.
sure. I'll do it.
Hmm. Sweet.
I just need to go talk to her
Okay.
and make those goddamn buttons.
Yeah.
Um, yep. Uh, thank our patrons,
Yeah.
Mr. Power and Alec and Adam and Chris and Johnny. You guys fucking rule.
You're
Love you.
awesome. Thank you. Keep being our patrons. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody to listen to us. You can
Hmm.
also find
Hmm.
us at www.prairiepunkpress.com. You can find all the links there. And yeah, make sure if you watch us on YouTube, you like and subscribe. If you listen to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of those from our RSS feed, leave a comment or something. Do something. Interact.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks for listening, everybody. And we'll see you next
Thanks.
time.
Bye.
Bye.